In war, the enemy is supposed to be over there. You know, across the field, behind the trees, on the other side of the river. And your job is to charge toward them with a musket and questionable life choices until someone's waving a white flag. But in 1788, in a foggy corner of Eastern Europe, the Austrian army managed to do something so spectacularly idiotic, so militarily embarrassing, that for years, people thought it had to be a myth. They fought a full-on battle. Against themselves. No Ottomans. No ambush. No secret flanks. Just drunk soldiers, bad translations, and the deadliest game of telephone in military history. This is the true story of the Battle of Karánsebes, a fight where the only thing deadlier than the bullets was the confusion. Scene 1. Austrian soup. It's late September, 1788. The Austro-Turkish War is 2 years in. On paper, Austria has the advantage, a professional army, solid supplies, and Emperor Joseph II himself overseeing the campaign. But there's a catch. The Austrian army is like a walking language experiment gone wrong. Imagine this. You've got German officers barking orders to Hungarian infantry, who are marching alongside Czech artillerymen, Serbian cavalry, Croatian scouts, and a bunch of Italian engineers who don't know why they're even there. Oh, and everyone's trying to follow commands in a language they don't speak. It's like trying to coordinate a flash mob using Google Translate. In the 1700s. Now, this soup of soldiers is camped near a sleepy little town called Karánsebes, in what's now modern-day Romania. They're waiting for the Ottoman forces to show up, but they're bored. It's quiet. Too quiet. And when a giant army full of young men gets bored, bad things happen. Scene 2. Schnapps, scouts, and shenanigans. To stay ahead of the Ottomans, the Austrian command sends out a cavalry scouting party, light hussars, across the Timis River to make sure the enemy isn't nearby. They're the elite. Fast, sharp, reliable. They ride out, weapons ready, eyes scanning the horizon for danger. What they find instead is Schnapps. A group of local Romani traders, camped just beyond the river, are selling strong alcohol to whoever has coins. And the hussars? Oh, they have coins. Within minutes, the scouting mission turns into a frat party with horses. Canteens are swapped for bottles. Laughs echo through the woods. There's singing, dancing. One guy probably challenges another to arm wrestle a tree. A couple hours later, some infantrymen show up, Austrian foot soldiers who heard that the hussars might have found something interesting. They're tired, thirsty, and very curious. But when they ask to join the party, the hussars say, "Nope, our schnapps." And just like that, it's no longer a recon mission. It's a bar brawl. Scene 3. The shot that broke reality. Words are exchanged. Then fists. And someone, no one knows who, fires a shot into the air. Now, remember, it's nighttime. The only light comes from the moon and a few flickering campfires. Most of the Austrian army is sleeping, or at least pretending to. But that gunshot? It echoes. And to the soldiers still across the river, it sounds like an attack. Someone yells, "Turks." The Turks are here. Instant chaos. Men scramble for weapons. Horses rear up. Officers try to calm their troops, shouting, "Halt, halt," which, in German, means stop. But to the Hungarian and Romanian soldiers listening from a distance, halt sounds suspiciously like Allah. As in Allah Akbar, the war cry of the Ottoman forces. Suddenly, they're convinced the Ottomans are attacking from within the camp. And the response is, well, exactly what you think would happen when 100,000 confused, half-drunk, multilingual men all think they're being ambushed by invisible enemies. They start shooting at anything that moves, at anyone who shouts, at shadows, at themselves. Scene 4. This is why we can't have nice things. Within minutes, friendly fire erupts across the camp. Some cavalry units charge through infantry tents. Artillery crews, seeing movement in the dark, fire cannons at their own lines. Officers scream orders, only to be mistaken for enemy commands. Drummers try to signal retreat, but the beat is mistaken for an Ottoman charge rhythm. And when a supply wagon full of powder explodes, It lights up the night like a thunderclap, confirming to anyone still unsure that, yes, the Turks must have invaded the entire camp. Men flee into the woods. Others leap into the Timis River, trying to escape. Many drown. It's chaos. Total, mind-bending, pants-wetting chaos. And here's the kicker. The Ottoman army? Still days away. So let's recap where we are. It's the middle of the night. Austrian scouts got drunk and fought each other. Someone fired a gun. Half the army thought the Ottomans were attacking. And now, the Austrian military, 100,000 men strong, is in full retreat. From itself. Let's keep going. Scene 5. The Great Stampede. As cannon blasts echo through the darkness and men scream about Turkish ambushes that don't exist, whole units begin to collapse. Some soldiers break formation entirely and run. Others try to hold the line, but they can't see who they're firing at, so they end up shooting their own comrades. Again and again. Imagine waking up in your tent to musket fire, horse hooves thundering past, and someone yelling in a language you don't understand. Do you stay put? Do you grab your weapon? Do you scream? For thousands of soldiers at Karánsebes, the answer was panic and pray. Some men literally trampled each other to get away from the supposed attack. Cavalry horses bolted and smashed through campfires and tents. Wagons overturned. Equipment burned. And while all this was happening, a few unlucky officers actually tried to restore order. But in the madness, uniforms meant nothing. Everyone was a potential enemy. A silhouette in the dark. A shout in the wrong tongue. One officer reportedly raised a lantern to signal calm and was instantly gunned down. And the chain reaction just got worse. Scene 6. Shots in the dark. By now, rumors are flying faster than musket balls. Some soldiers claim the Ottomans have broken through the lines. Others swear they've seen enemy cavalry riding through camp. A few terrified souls even think they're being poisoned because someone spilled schnapps on their uniform and it smelled weird. It's the 18th century version of a mass panic tweet storm, but with bayonets. And the worst part? All this madness is being amplified by the language barrier. Orders like fall back or stand down are misheard and misinterpreted. So some units retreat. Others think they've been ordered to advance. And a few start attacking the units that are retreating. Because obviously, retreat must mean surrender, and surrender must mean enemy. And thus, soldiers turn on each other again. This wasn't just friendly fire. This was a full-blown, large-scale self-sabotage. Scene 7. Even the emperor ran. Now, remember Emperor Joseph II? The guy in charge of this whole military operation? He was actually nearby during all of this. And when word reached him that the Ottomans were attacking, he didn't have time to ask questions. He jumped on a horse and got the hell out. In the panic, he was thrown from his mount and had to be carried away by guards. The head of the Habsburg Empire was literally running away from his own army. That was attacking itself. You can't make this up. Scene 8. The morning after. By dawn, the guns go quiet. The screams fade. The fires die down. And the Austrians look around at what they've done. Dozens, possibly hundreds, of soldiers are dead or missing. The camp is in shambles. Wagons overturned. Tents burned. Horses still running off into the distance. And when scouts ride out to check for enemy movement, they find nothing. The Ottoman army never arrived. They were still miles away, completely unaware that the Austrians had just wiped out a large chunk of their own force. It was like showing up late to a party, only to find the host had already burned their house down because they thought you were a burglar. Scene 9. You did what? Back in Vienna, the generals tried to make sense of the disaster. Some reports tried to downplay the event, calling it a brief disorder or confusion during night maneuvers. Others simply refused to believe it happened at all. Because seriously, who wants to admit that your elite imperial army, trained for years and funded by the empire's treasury, just fought a battle against itself? Unofficial estimates suggest that somewhere between 500 and 1,200 Austrian soldiers were killed or injured. No enemy bullets, no foreign sabers, just friendly fire, miscommunication, and schnapps. Scene 10. What happened last night? So imagine waking up in a field that smells like gunpowder and bad decisions. There are spent musket balls all around you. Your commander is missing. Half your unit is gone. And the guy next to you is wearing half a tent and one boot, mumbling something about ghost cavalry. This was the dawn of September 18th, 1788, for the Austrian army at Karánsebes. Commanders stumbled around the wreckage trying to count the living. Some men wandered back into camp hours later, dazed, carrying empty muskets and bruises they couldn't explain. One group of officers had literally spent the night hiding under a bridge because they heard someone yell, "The Turks are here." Spoiler alert, the Turks were not there. Scene 11. Actual Ottoman army. Hello? And now, the punchline of this entire story. 2 full days later, the real Ottoman army arrived. They crested a hill expecting to face a full-strength Austrian force. Cannons ready, trenches dug, soldiers lined up. Instead, they saw a smoking ruin, tents in tatters, wagons broken, and an army so demoralized they didn't even bother to resist. The Ottomans didn't need to lift a single finger. They walked into Karánsebes and took the city without firing a single shot. That's how badly the Austrians had broken themselves. Honestly, the Ottomans probably looked around and thought, wait, did they already lose to someone else? Nope, they just lost to themselves. Scene 12. Damage report. So, how bad was it really? Well, there's no exact number, because the Austrians didn't exactly file an "oops, we fought ourselves" report. But historical estimates suggest hundreds, maybe over 1,000, were killed or wounded that night. And not one of them was killed by the enemy. Horses drowned. Men fell off cliffs. Artillery pieces were destroyed by their own side. One unlucky guy was reportedly killed by a latrine wagon that overturned during the retreat. That's not a glorious battlefield death. That's a punchline. Even in the bloody context of the 1700s, this was a farce. Scene 13. The cover-up now. You might assume that after something this embarrassing, people would demand answers. But this was the 18th century, and empires didn't like admitting mistakes. The Habsburg leadership quietly scrubbed the incident from official records. Officers who survived were strongly encouraged not to talk about it. And Emperor Joseph too? He reportedly never spoke of the event again, which is probably smart. Because if your army just beat itself up in a drunken misunderstanding and cost you a battle without ever seeing the enemy, it's probably best not to mention that at dinner parties. Scene 14. The war goes on despite the disaster. The Austro-Turkish War kept going for 3 more years. And spoiler, it didn't go great for the Austrians. The army suffered more defeats, morale stayed low, and Joseph II died in 1790, just before the war ended. He never saw a victory. Only chaos, confusion, and one of the worst military blunders in European history. And the Battle of Karánsebes? It faded into legend. A story so ridiculous that some historians debated whether it even happened. But the records are there. The eyewitnesses were real. And the lesson? Never mix booze, language barriers, and weapons. Scene 15. Lessons from a disaster. So after one of the most humiliating blunders in European military history, you'd think the Austrian army would sit down and figure out what the heck went wrong. And to their credit, they kind of did. Sort of. Lesson number 1? Maybe don't let half your army get drunk the night before a major operation. Seems obvious. But apparently, that memo got lost in translation, like most things at Karánsebes. Lesson 2? If your army speaks a dozen languages, maybe get some translators. Or, I don't know, flashcards? Hand signals? At the very least, figure out a universal word for "don't shoot." We're on the same side. Because when your soldiers can't even ask for help without it sounding like an ambush, your army might have bigger problems than the Ottomans. Scene 16. How do you even explain this? Imagine being the guy responsible for writing the official report on this battle. You're sitting there like, "Dear Emperor, Your Majesty." So, it turns out the enemy was us. It's the military equivalent of punching yourself in the face and then blaming the mirror. But instead of owning it, The Austrians just quietly swept it under the rug. Officially, the Battle of Karánsebes was not a battle. It was reclassified as a nighttime maneuvering mishap. That's like calling the Titanic an unexpected docking issue. And it wasn't until centuries later that historians really started piecing together how absurd and how tragically real this night actually was. Scene 17. Folklore and jokes. Over time, the Battle of Karánsebes took on a life of its own. Soldiers who survived the war whispered about it in taverns. Locals passed down the tale with a grin. You know, the Austrians once lost a battle to their own shadow. Even outside Austria, the story became a sort of punchline for military incompetence. You could almost imagine other European generals saying, "Well, at least we're not that bad." It became the military version of slipping on a banana peel with bayonets. Even today, military academies study it, not just for the history, but as a cautionary tale on what not to do ever again. Scene 18. Did it really happen? Now, to be fair, not everyone agrees on every detail of Karánsebes. Some historians think the numbers were exaggerated. Others say there was no formal report, so the whole thing might have grown into legend. But here's the thing. There are just enough accounts from Austrian soldiers, from letters, from later archives, that historians generally agree something very real and very dumb happened that night. And when the smoke cleared, one thing was certain. It wasn't the Ottomans who humiliated the Habsburg army. It was fog, booze, confusion, and a whole lot of panicked yelling in the dark. Scene 19. If it happened today, now imagine if Karánsebes happened today. There'd be drones capturing every moment. It'd be trending on military Twitter as #UpsAllFriendlyFire. Soldiers would be live streaming it on TikTok. Yo, we just shot our own horse. This war is wild. But back then, it was quietly erased, or tried to be, because no empire wants a footnote that reads, defeated by alcohol and paranoia. Scene 20. Buried in the archives. So how do you bury an event where thousands of your own troops accidentally shot at shadows, horses, and each other? Well, if you're the 18th century Austrian military, you just don't talk about it.no monuments. No honors. No big memorial parades. Just a very quiet oops, and then everyone collectively pretended it never happened. For decades, maybe even centuries, the Battle of Karánsebes lived mostly in whispers, buried in obscure Austrian records and passed around as military folklore. The only real proof it happened? A handful of reports and a lingering sense of second-hand embarrassment. Scene 21. But history has a sense of humor. But here's the thing. History might forget names, dates, even full battles. But it never forgets a story this absurd. Over the years, the Battle of Karánsebes has popped up in books, podcasts, memes, and yes, even military training classes. Because once you hear that an army literally defeated itself, you don't forget it. And really, how could you? Thousands of troops. Total panic. Zero enemies. It's like a Monty Python sketch if it had a body count. Scene 22. Modern-day punchline in modern military circles. Karánsebes is the ultimate, it could be worse story. Your radio failed during a drill? At least you didn't launch a full-blown self-destruction sequence because someone spilled schnapps. Miscommunication in your squad? At least your horse didn't start the whole thing. It's a punchline, sure. But it's also a brutal, bloody reminder of how fast things fall apart when leadership fails, communication breaks down, and people panic. Even without an enemy in sight, chaos can still find a way. Scene 23. The real lesson. There's something oddly human about Karánsebes. Because at its core, this wasn't just a military disaster. It was a perfect storm of fear, confusion, and assumptions gone wrong. It's what happens when leaders give bad orders, soldiers don't ask questions, and everyone assumes the worst. Sound familiar? Because in today's world, where misinformation spreads faster than cannonballs, it's easy to see how Karánsebes still applies. Whether it's on a battlefield, in politics, or even online, sometimes we're our own worst enemies. Scene 24. Final thoughts. The Battle of Karánsebes wasn't really a battle. There were no victors. No glory, just fog, fear, and friendly fire. But it stands today as one of the most bizarre and strangely poetic reminders in military history that sometimes the loudest danger doesn't come from across the border. It comes from within. And maybe, just maybe, don't bring schnapps to a war zone. If you found this story fascinating, ridiculous, or brand new, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. Because history is full of stories like this, strange, tragic, and sometimes too absurd to be fiction. This was the Battle of Karánsebes. And it wasn't just a disaster, it was a masterpiece of mayhem.